As folks are coming in, I just want to welcome you. My name is Jenny Savino. I have the great pleasure of working in the alumni office. And this evening, we are thrilled to have our wonderful stars who put together a great program around finance and venture capital.
Probably not responsible,
And a friendly reminder as you join us, if you could please mute your computer, that would be fantastic. And the other thing that's wonderful about being in community is we purposely have it in this format. We are purposely not doing it in a webinar so that we can see each other. If you are so moved to keep your cameras on, we warmly welcome you to do so. And we also understand if it doesn't work for you to do that. We would love if you would go over your own name. There are 3 dots and it gives you the opportunity to rename yourself. We would love it if you would consider sharing what class year you are and if it pertains to you, your parent years. So you go over your own name and there are 3 dots and it says rename. We hope that you will share your name, your class year, and parent years if that pertains to you. We also encourage you, if you don't already have it in format, to have it in speaker format. You can find that in the top right where it says view. If you keep it in speaker view, then the folks in my office who are joining me tonight will be able to spotlight folks, and it will help you as we expect a couple hundred folks coming in tonight. So you'll be kind of trying to find where the voices are coming from. But if you have it in speaker, then you will be able to see it. And likely you're seeing a giant Jenny Savino on your screen, which we'll fix in a minute as we pass it over to the students. If you have any questions throughout the night, please feel free to reach out to Naomi Sobelson-Mashburn, class of 08, who we have the pleasure of working with in our alumni office, or you can certainly chat me if you have any questions. As we share, the students will be asking the questions tonight, and as we get to the end of the questions that they have pulled together, we will then have an opportunity to open up to questions, and that will go into the chat space, and we will invite you to ask those questions at that time. Okay. So without further ado, I'm going to warmly welcome Audrey Powers to kick off our evening. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to our alumni and students who have gathered here this evening. My name is Audrey Powers, and I'm a day student from the class of 2024. I'm a member of STARS, and I'm here to introduce the format of tonight's Blue Run Steep programming. The Blue Run Speaker Series was launched in 2021 by the Student Alumni Representatives, also known as STARS, which is an organization of students interested in connecting with alumni in various ways through programming with the alumni office. Tonight's focus is alumni in finance and venture capital. STARS will post questions that we have written and include some that were submitted during registration by our attendees. At the conclusion of tonight's program, we hope to open up the chat to invite additional questions from our live audience tonight. You will learn from our panelists about their professional past and Andover through the course of this conversation. For their full bios, you can reference your emailed event reminder, and we will also share the link to them in the chat. We only have an hour together, so we will jump right in. To introduce our panelists, I would like to welcome Sui Yu and Gretchen Schwartz from the class of 2023.
Thank you, Audrey. Hi, everyone. My name's Sui. I'm a senior. I live in Adams, and I'm also from California and London. Our first panelist for the night is Ms. Tasneem Dohadwala from the class of 2000 and parent from the class of 2024. She graduated from Wellesley College and Harvard Business School and previously worked at financial services at the sell side of Lehman Brothers and at Matrix Partners. She was the founding partner at Excelestar Ventures, where 2 of her most notable investments were later acquired by Boston Scientific. She is a Harvard Business School venture capital advisor, as well as a managing partner of Golden Seeds, an early stage investment firm focused on women and gender diversity. Ms. Dohadwala is a champion for women in business leadership, serving as a member of Women of Lehman Brothers, then as president of Wellesley College Alumni of Boston. Among many board positions, Ms. Dohadwala is a member of the Andover Development Board and head of the women's organization at our local mosque. Please welcome Ms. Dohadwala. Our second panelist is Mr. Kanyi Maqubela, class of 2003, who comes from a deeply rooted Andover family of teachers and administrators. Mr. Maqubela graduated from Stanford University, and he's managing partner at Kindred Ventures, an early stage venture capital fund investing in mission-driven technology companies in early stages in fintech, health, wellness, e-commerce, supply chain, and climate tech. He previously served as a partner at Collaborative Fund, a venture capital firm focused on early-stage tech companies. As an entrepreneur, Mr. Maqubela co-founded with his Andover classmate, Dr. Jeff Wessler, Heartbeat Health, an organization aimed at revolutionizing cardiovascular care through virtual intervention. Mr. Maqubela has also served as a lecturer and adjunct at New York University Tisch School of Arts. We warmly welcome Mr. Maqubela.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Sri. My name is Gretchen Swartz, and I'm a senior from Bolton, Massachusetts, and on campus, I live in Adams. Our third panelist is Ms. Karen Simeone from the class of 1994 and a parent of the class of 2026. She graduated from Georgetown and studied at the London School of Economics. She is managing director at HarbourVest, focusing on investments in private credit transactions. Ms. Simeone has experience throughout the private investment lifecycle, including sourcing, evaluating, structuring, underwriting, and managing secured debt securities of middle market companies. Ms. Simeone was previously the managing director at TCW in the direct lending group and also worked at Stairway Capital and HVB Group. Karen began her career at JP Morgan as a part of the leveraged finance group and later became a member of the high yield research team. Welcome, Ms. Simeone. Last but certainly not least, our final panelist is Ms. Sandra Urie from the class of 1970, and a Phillips Academy trustee emerita. Ms. Urie earned a master's from Yale. She's a former chair and CEO of Cambridge Associates, a global investment firm with clients in over 30 countries. She is a strong advocate for women's rights and advancement in the workplace, especially in finance. She has focused much of her career at Cambridge Associates on investments in the nonprofit sector and is proud to have made her mark at the firm of Cambridge Associates, now advising and leading educational endowments and foundations across the U.S. She served as vice chair of the Investors Committee of the U.S. President's Working Group on Financial Markets from 2007 to 2010, where she focused on defining best practices in alternative assets. She currently serves on many boards, including Stanford Management Company, the Crane Institute of Sustainability, and the Board of Overseers at the Boston Symphony Orchestra. Andover has recognized Ms. Urie with two prestigious awards. In 1998, the school awarded Ms. Urie, the 1998 Andover Distinguished Service Award for her deep and vast roles as a volunteer. This fall, Ms. Urie received the 2022 Andover Alumni Award of Distinction. Ms. Urie's additional honors include the Institutional Investor 2015 Lifetime Achievement Award, 100 Women in Hedge Funds 2016 North American Industry Leadership Award, and the 2014 Private Equity Trailblazer Award. It is an honor to have Ms. Urie join us tonight.
Thank you, Sui and Gretchen. Hi, everyone. My name is Ananya Mathuri, and I am a senior from Hong Kong. Our first question is for Mr. Maqubela, class of 2003. You have had massive success as a managing partner for an early stage venture capital fund. What do you look for in a budding company or idea to invest in?
Oh gosh, massive success. I wouldn't go that far. I just got invited to the game, we'll put it that way. With respect to what I look for, seed stage, which is where I invest, is usually before you have a product in market or any revenue. And so it actually has to come down to the founders. And the simplest way of articulating what I look for founders is somebody that I'd want to work for. The reason why is I'd want to work for them. A lot of brilliant people would too, but maybe a better way to put it is it's very founder driven. And so at the end of the day, we try and assess whether or not this person has the skills and the resources and the circumstance to be able to take it the distance. So I'm very founder driven because that's kind of all you have to go on at that stage.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Maqubela. Hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Boo, and I'm a senior from Clarksville, Maryland. Our next question is from Ms. Simeone, class of 1994. What inspired you to pursue a career in finance? And what are some key experiences or moments in your career that you feel have shaped your journey?
Thank you for the question. So the first, I think, thing that I had that I wanted to go into finance actually happened while I was at Andover. I took economics with Dr. Strudwick, who was an awesome professor, and he got me really interested in economics as, I would say, a lens to understand the world in a way that I had never thought about before. And so When I went to Georgetown, I was really interested in continuing to pursue economics and learn more and get deeper into kind of I guess the depth and education that economics could provide. I also saw economics, and I still do, as a very international subject, and that was of interest to me as well. I think some people can think about it as very local, but I think finance and economics has many international branches. That was something I was really interested in, and I found that economics and then later finance was a way to sort of explore that interest. I guess the other thing I would say is that I kind of got into finance from a trial and error perspective, actually. So I studied, and I was fortunate enough to be able to get various internships along the way and figure out what I really wanted to be able to do and try things out. So the first internship I had, I actually worked for a large multinational company, and I was able to see what it was like to work in the corporate development part of that company. And that was fascinating, but I knew I needed much more broad-based exposure to the business world. And so I wanted to try something else. The second internship that I had, I worked for the Federal Reserve in Boston. And I was fortunate to be able to do economic research. Again, that was pretty interesting, but it was a lot of kind of book and computer driven research. It was less about the interactions with people. And I decided I really wanted something more fast paced. And then I was able to do an internship at a private equity firm. And I think I found much more of the equilibrium I was looking for. I was able to look at many different transactions, which was, the way I thought about it, many different subjects. I could learn about all different things. And I was also able to be in a more fast-paced environment, be able to interact with people. And those things kind of stuck with me and led me into finance and staying in finance.
Thank you, Ms. Simeone. Hello, everyone. My name is Kylan Lee, and I'm an upper from Reading, Massachusetts. Our next question is for Ms. Dohadwala, class of 2000. Finance and venture capitalism is an industry that historically has been difficult to break into without connections. How did you first get your start in the industry?
So I actually got my start also through an internship. It was actually at Wellesley College after my junior year, or during my junior year. I interviewed for a bunch of financial services jobs, and I got a couple of offers for a summer internship and went to Lehman Brothers. That's the one I decided to go to, and I loved it. I must have done well enough because they offered me a full-time job. And so that's where I started off after a senior. So I really used my Wellesley Career Services sort of platform that they gave us to find my first job in finance. And I also, what I did actually to prepare for all my interviews, I remember this really distinctly, is I found the Wellesley alumni who were at the places I was interviewing at, and I begged for some time because they were all busy people, and just to see if they'd help me, prepare for my interviews. And they all were like thrilled to help me prepare for my interview. And like they did, some of them did like multiple calls with me, which was amazing. So I definitely recommend that. Reach out to alumni. They're always willing to help, get you ready for an interview, or even tell you about what the job is like after you have it. And then in terms of my VC network, I actually got my job at Matrix Partners because there was a HBS alum at Matrix that I convinced to take a chance on me as an intern. And so that's how I started in VC. And I basically, after HBS, I graduated, I used every single network I could get hold of to just meet people. I was at lots of networking events. And anyone who would be willing to have a conversation with me that was in the world I was trying to enter and find deals and build my investor network, I would meet with them. And then I'd always end the conversation with, is there somebody else that you can introduce me to that may be helpful? And they always had one or two people that I could go and contact, and I did. And that's how I built. So I have two networks. I have my investor network where I do deals with them and they show me deals and we kind of work together on deals. And then I have my entrepreneur network. So I kind of had to build both sides of the sort of ecosystem for myself. And it took a lot of time, and I had to put myself out there a lot, and I had to be really patient. But eventually, who you are as a person and the work you do speaks for itself, and you are able to draw people to yourself. But, it takes time and determination and patience to get there. So that's how I did it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Dohadwala. Hi, everybody. My name is Nigel Savage. I'm a senior in Thompson House and a proud Atlanta native. My question is from Ms. Urie. Your experience as a Phillips Academy trustee emerita and a winner of the Andover Alumni Distinguished Service Award and a winner of the Andover Alumni Award of Distinction demonstrates your strong connection to the school. Can you talk about what your time at Andover meant to you and how it has influenced your life and your career?
Sure. Thanks, Nigel. Abbott, I went to Abbott, not to Andover, so I'm a bit older than my fellow panelists, and I arrived there in 1966. Abbott was foundational for me. It's in fact where I began the path to become a Russian language teacher. You think I'm just an investment professional, but in fact, my first career was as a teaching fellow at Andover, teaching Russian language and working in the admissions office. So I have an Abbott experience and an Andover experience. I was on the faculty at Andover for 9 years before I left to go to graduate school at Yale. And the time at Andover, I learned so much about the operating economics of an independent school. I realized that I maybe originally wanted to be a Russian language teacher, but I was much more fascinated by what it takes to run a nonprofit, what the role of the endowment is, what an operating budget looks like. And I realized I hadn't trained for those kinds of things. So I was learning on the job. And that's what motivated me to go to business school. I chose Yale School of Management, which was a somewhat non-traditional business school. So I'd say that I've been connected to Abbott and Andover since 1966, and with various roles there. It's been a core volunteer space for me, a core definer of who I am. It has caused me to be so deeply committed to mission-driven institutions and institutions where excellence matters, where intellectual curiosity matters, and where hard work matters. And I've taken all of those lessons from Abbott and Andover and applied them in the now close to 38 years that I've been at Cambridge Associates.
Wow, thank you, Ms. Urie. Our next question is for Mr. Maqubela. How do you utilize your Andover network to secure new deals and partnerships?
Oh gosh. So my Andover history isn't as deep as Miss Urie's. Hers is inspiring. I don't know if anybody is, but it's modestly deep as well. And so my parents served on the faculty there for 2 decades. So I grew up on the campus. And so that means that outside of the Andover circle, I have a pretty random last name, but within the Andover circle, I have a relatively relevant last name. And so I get to lean on a little bit of nepotism and trade on that name sometimes. What that materially means, though, is in venture capital, one of the quirky things about it, and I can't decide whether this is a good or a bad thing, so maybe we can talk about this later, is that it's actually all about trust and relationship. And that means that it's not about doing all of the diligence down to going and talking to every single customer. You do some diligence, but then you have to kind of trust the rest of it. It's not about calling every single person and validating every single fact you see in a presentation. It's ultimately about trust. And part of why that's good and bad is you couldn't credibly do the type of work that we do without having to just go on faith at some level and just trust that people are doing what they say they're doing and people are who they say they are and so forth. But on another level, if you aren't in those trusted networks, it can actually be pretty challenging. And frankly, there are people who abuse that trust. And so trust and relationships is a very, very key sort of architecture to how our business works. And again, it cuts both ways. But what that has meant for me and how it has resulted in extraordinary good fortune for me is I'm given the benefit of the doubt perhaps more often than a stranger would, and that makes a difference. And the truth is, whether or not you were formerly a teacher at Andover, or your parents were teachers at Andover, or you just went there, you're more likely to be given the benefit of the doubt because of that shared context as well. And you're more likely to get to participate in that same non-city culture, regardless of how you've participated in it in the past. And so one of the things that I've been able to do is when fundraising, I've been able to get to know people and get introductions to potential capital partners by way of this trusted network. When I'm doing references on founders that I'm thinking about investing in, I'm able to call people I went to high school with, or people who I know, who have college friends that can help validate because I went to high school with them. And so being able to navigate our business with some trust shortcuts makes a really, really, really big difference. And frankly, the reason why I gave that answer is the simple answer to your question is every single part of my business has been benefited by the Andover network. But it's in part because the way our business works is you have to have references, and those references have to be able to vouch for you, sort of make up the delta in the diligence.
Thank you, Mr. Maqubela. Our next question is for Ms. Simeone. We have many current students and young alumni joining us this evening listening in. What are qualities and skills that you look for most in employees just entering the workforce? And what advice do you have for young people who are looking to get into this field?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I was actually really excited when I read this question in advance because I think it's a good one, and I bet all of the panelists would have lots of things to add to it. So I would invite that in the Q&A. I guess the first thing I would say is that a lot of the skills that I look for are skills that I think I learned at Andover. So this is not, many of the skills that I think are required to be successful in finance are not sort of the advanced stuff that you might learn in college or in graduate school, but rather skills that you really develop during your Andover years. I would break those into what I call hard skills and soft skills. And with respect to the hard skills, I'd say first and foremost, excellent communication. I think writing, I think presenting, those are, again, things that everyone at Andover gets a whole lot of practice doing. And I think that those are skills that we all use on a daily basis. Analytical skills, being able to pick up really dense documents, read through them very quickly, get to the bottom line as to what they're all about and what their, what the key points are. I think those are, again, critical skills that all Andover students develop. And then with respect to what I call the soft skills, and I think that there is, I will say, an increasing recognition in today's workplace of how important those skills are, but collaboration cannot be underestimated. Understanding how to work with people who might be your friends, but people who might not be your friends, and that you also can work with and respect and be able to achieve a common objective or a common goal. Being able to be a consensus builder. You may work in a team where people have different views, and being able to, in a very productive manner, sort of share those views and come to a middle ground and progress a project together. I think these are things that, again, you learn at Andover and you take with you into your career. From an advice perspective, I guess I would echo maybe a little bit of what I heard Tasneem say a few minutes ago. I think first of all is don't be afraid to be bold. Send the email, call people up, use your alumni network. I think alumni are very willing and able to help. And if one alum isn't willing, find another one who is, because they're out there. The second thing I would say is don't burn bridges and do network. Even if you feel like an interaction didn't go well, you should continue to stay in touch with people, not just sort of, leave it aside or what have you. I think that there's a lot to be said for staying in touch with people. And then finally, I would say seek out a mentor. It's always really helpful if you can find someone who can help you along the way, and that you may have many mentors along the way. You may have Andover teachers right now who are your mentors, and that may change as you get to college and you get into the workplace. So those would be some perspectives I would share.
Thank you, Ms. Simeone. Our next question is for Ms. Dohadwala. You are not only a very successful person, but also a role model to many women in business. How do you think your experience as a woman of color affects how you approach your job? Additionally, how has gender equality evolved in an investment firm company culture over the past decade?
Well, you guys give us way too much credit. Really nice of you guys. So I will say that, you know, as a first generation Muslim American woman, growing up, there were oftentimes I didn't feel like I belonged. And now as I reflect upon that, I think it's because I didn't have that many mirrors. I didn't have, you know, people that I could see myself in growing up. And the few that I had, I obviously clung on to them really hard. So there was always that sense of not quite belonging, or not quite knowing where I fit in exactly. And so with that, when I reflect on that, I feel like I'm really aware of that now. And so when I meet female founders, or I meet underrepresented minority founders, I feel like I can truly empathize with them. I can understand where they're coming from. I feel maybe they even view me as a mirror for themselves. And that empathy can be really powerful. I also feel like I can perhaps understand their challenges in a way that other people may not be able to understand them. And together, then we can kind of think through those challenges that they may be facing, whether it be raising money or hiring talent or leadership style, and we can work on that, and we can, you know, do better together. And, you know, and I hope that empathy is something that is not underestimated, because I think it's really important, because as Kanyi just mentioned, right, the element of trust is critical in our business, and empathy is a critical component of trust, right? If you don't feel like the other person understands you, then it's really hard to lay all the cards out on the table. It's really hard to have the difficult conversations, because all these companies that we invest in, they go through many iterations. They pivot. They have, you know, bumps along the way, and they have to feel comfortable with their investor to come to them and say, hey, we're having a really hard time. Can you help us? But if they don't feel like they can connect with their investor, then they're not going to have that conversation. And as for the investment culture over the last decade, that may be a panel in itself, but I will try to sum it up as quickly as I can. I will say that we have made progress, and I will tell you where I think the progress has been made. The progress is made is because there is now awareness around the issue. There is awareness around the funding gaps that exist in our environment, our space, our business. And there is more of a call to action than there was, you know, a decade ago. So I think that's where I see the progress. But I think that I think that there are people working to solve this problem. But I think the percentage of and you know, this is based on numbers, so I'm not just sort of spitballing, but the percentage of the people that are working to solve this problem don't represent actually the number of funding dollars. So there's a disparity. And so there's work that we have to do. For example, 9 out of 10 top VC decision makers are still men. 1.9%, just 1.9% of all VC dollars went to female founders in 2022. So last year, which is actually down from the year before. And why do we talk about this? Why do we talk about diversity? Why is it important? It's not just important because it feels good. It's actually economically really important, because there's a lot of data that says that heterogeneous teams outperform homogeneous teams all the time. So for example, ethnically diverse founders enjoy average exit multiples on their companies 30% higher than those of solely white founding teams. So 30%. So we're talking about a 3.26 multiple versus a 2.5 multiple. And when you're talking about millions of dollars, that is serious money. And it's actually even more expounded when you get to the C-suite, that when you have ethnically diverse C-suite teams, they are performing 64% higher than all white C-suite teams. So it's not just about doing the right thing or feeling good. It makes economic sense. So it is a problem that we need to work on, but the way we need to work on it isn't necessarily kind of just taking the way we've done things and sort of just tweaking things, we have to reimagine the space that we all work in. We have to reimagine the structures, and we have to start understanding where our biases and sort of the way we do things, how is those practices creating barriers and allowing for us to perpetuate these inequities. So we have work to do, but we're getting there.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Dohadwala. Our next question is for Ms. Urie. You talked about earlier, like your deep ties with Andover and Abbott. Can you talk about how you found ways to integrate those non-SPE values into your career? How does someone in the finance field align one's values with their career as an investor?
Okay, I've loved listening to the other panelists. I have so many echoes of their comments, and particularly the issues around diversity and equity and inclusion and access to this profession. Very similar to the way I think about access to Andover. I was privileged to chair a long-range planning as a trustee, a long-range planning effort in 2004, and actually Kanyi's father was on the committee with me, so it's fun to have him on this call. And we came out of that committee talking about what I call access and success. Access to, and I can say that talent resides everywhere. Talent doesn't reside in one single part of the population; it resides everywhere. And the challenge is for people at Andover or people in our various firms to go out and find that talent. Because if we don't, we're leaving success on the table. We are missing out big time. Not only are heterogeneous teams more effective, but they're more talented. Why would we leave all the talent in the women or in underrepresented minorities? And so I just wanted to add that comment before I talk about how I mix these things together. Non-SIBI is so important. And I feel privileged to work at Cambridge Associates. Cambridge Associates provides investment advice, policymaking, guidance, and oversight to endowed nonprofit institutions. So we work with colleges, universities, foundations, medical institutions, schools, cultural institutions, and we work with their investment committees to help them have very successful returns, give risk-adjusted returns given what they're trying to achieve. When I found Cambridge Associates, I thought it was the greatest blend ever of my commitment to places like Andover and my commitment to a career in investments. And at the time, when I was coming out of business school in 1985, I couldn't find any place else like it. And thank goodness I could talk them into hiring a former Russian language teacher to become an investment consultant, because my powers of persuasion clearly were effective in that regard. And the rest is history. There were 40 people in the firm when I joined, about 80 clients. Now we are a global firm with about just over 1,000 clients. 700 of those clients are endowed nonprofit institutions and charities globally. So I feel that I have been able to live my values by working at Cambridge Associates, and been able to extend the commitment I had to Andover when I was working there, and to Andover as a volunteer, to so many other institutions. And to be clear, those institutions don't exist to be banks or financially stable. They exist to achieve a mission. Each one of these institutions exists to achieve a mission. And that could be education, it could be cultural collections, it could be, anything. You think about all the nonprofits you're familiar with. And so where I feel so fortunate, privileged, and fulfilled, frankly, is being able to blend the interest in investments with and applying it to mission-driven institutions to help them be more stable financially, so they can do what they're meant to do, which is pursue the mission that is their unique objective.
Thank you, Ms. Urie. I loved your comment on diversity. I mean, I always see the same mission here at Andover. When we're trying to find the top talent of youth in every quarter, that's really what diversity is about. Anyways, hello everyone. My name is Chris Wong. I'm from Hong Kong, and I'm currently in Upper living in Carriage House. So we have two final questions for our panelists tonight. But we will also open up the chat functionality and invite anyone to ask any questions. In the chat, please just directly message the person titled question for panelists, and feel free to indicate if you're directing your question to any specific panelists. Anyways, the next question is, we all have something to share this evening, and that is Andover. We all have blue blood. So do you have a lesson, a memory, or a teacher that you can identify from Andover that has really informed your approach as a leader in the financial world?
Yeah, I've got a couple. Gosh, I was trying to run through them. There's so many. The first I would say, and I actually never had her as a student, but Barbara Landis Chase, I want to put on that list. And I was inspired by Barbara Landis Chase because I had the good fortune, having grown up in Andover, of overlapping with Advisor and with McNamara, and having seen generations of headmasters. And it was the first time that it wasn't the headmaster, it was the head of school. And in fact, headmaster is now an acronym we don't use anymore. And I was really inspired by her being a trailblazer and her going, where no one had previously been, and her learning how to, be a powerful, forceful, persuasive leader, as a woman in a world that had historically been dominated by men. And I thought that was really neat, actually. I have, continuing this thread of speaking to the power of diversity. I so often think about how BLC was able to level up Andover, and I think a big part of that was because she was so different than her predecessors in ways that were important. So she's one that gets a shout out for me for inspiration. And as a student body president at the time, I had some interface with her, and Nigel had mentioned that game recognized game. He's, I think, a co-president as well with Urie. So greetings to the fellow presidents here. But the other one that I would mention was Peter Watt, who was a physics teacher. And the reason that I mentioned Dr. Watt is Dr. Watt taught pretty hard physics, and is, I think, physics 58 they called it then, or 580 or something like that. And we would all sit in the library in the quiet room, I think the Garber room, and just struggle together, the whole class. We would all be sitting there like, we don't understand what in the world is going on here. And there were a couple of pieces out of that I really appreciated. One of them was, when you have a problem set that feels impossible, being able to team up with people and collaborate to kind of push your way through it. And, oh, I know a little bit of this from math. Oh, I've got a tactic on this from chemistry. Oh, I can pull this together, was really powerful. The second was having the confidence to go into that problem set and know this is something I've never seen before, and it's something that's way over my head, but I'm going to just roll up my sleeves and figure it out. And as an investor, you're often faced with a pitch that smells interesting and looks good, but there's stuff that you're going to have to really figure out. And you have to have the self-confidence, but also the trust and collaboration, and the trust in peers, and the willingness to do the work. And because physics was just so darn hard while we were there, it kind of forced up my hand that way. So those would be my two answers.
Karen, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I mean, I did a shout out to Dr. Strudwick for economics before, and I'm going to echo that. I think there's some other faculty who were really formative for me. Nina Scott was fantastic. I had her for, I guess it's English 20, now 200. And she ruthlessly taught us how to write, and I think she'd be very happy to hear me say that. So she was fantastic, and I again taught life skills that I use every day. But I would also say, Mrs. Litvin, I had for calculus, and she was just so unfailingly committed to her students, and to see a woman who was in that type of a field who was so committed to teaching her students. I remember doing my math homework at her kitchen table. She was just always there and always available, and to see that dedication was also really an inspiration as well.
Tasneem?
So first of all, what has carried, I always think of when I think of Andover is actually non-civi, not for oneself, because that has been something that has, I know it seems so cliche and we all think it's Andover, but it really has defined a lot of who I am in terms of not just professionally, the way I think about my profession and figuring out ways in which you can lift other people up while you're working and still doing what you want to be doing. Also thinking about all, the sort of service work I do, whether it be at my kids' independent private, elementary school, at our mosque, and also inculcating that level and that sense of service with my kids. I don't think service isn't just about necessarily being philanthropic financially. It's actually going there and, packing a meal, delivering the meal, and actually it's everything. It's the whole continuum. And that sense of service started so early in my life at Phillips, and that sense of service has continued with me. And then the other thing I will always remember is my physics class, because it was the first class where I finally realized that I actually have to use a textbook to study. Like, I shouldn't just take tests without reading the textbook. And I actually think I got a really barely passing grade on the first test. And let me tell you, I learned how to study after that test. I got extra help. I advocated for myself. I read that textbook like nobody's business. I did every problem you could ever think of. And I managed to, do fine in physics. But, Andover taught me how to study. And that is a big deal. And it actually still matters now, because part of being a venture capitalist is doing diligence and studying and researching. And that all started at Andover.
Andy.
My turn. There's so many people, but when I saw this question in advance, I thought of a couple of people. And one is my 11th grade English teacher, Jean St. Pierre. Some of you at Andover may know her because she came over from Abbott when the two schools merged, and she was a real leader, I think, in the English department at Andover as she was at Abbott. And what she did for me was, I had a real deep interest in the classic Russian literature, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Chekhov, Pushkin, and I was reading them, on my own. And I told her I wanted to do an independent study on this literature, and she kind of sponsored me and said, sure, let's do it. And so I worked hard. She was, when we talk about mentors, I think of her as a mentor who launched me into that study. And once I got into it, I said, I have to learn this language because I have to read these books in the original. So that's what took me then into learning the language, and which was my major in college. The other person I'd say was Ted Sizer. He was my first boss. I was a teaching fellow at Andover in 1974. Ted Sizer was head of school. The way I describe it with Ted is he was a visionary, and we were running so hard to keep up with him and to just aspire to have the kind of vision that he had. But he, at the same time, he wasn't lofty. You would go and have a cup of coffee with him. He always had the time. And he taught me a lot about leadership, and leadership about being bold, being kind, being trustworthy, all those things combined. And he was just a remarkable educator. And I learned so much from him. And by the way, Kanyi, I was on the search committee that selected Barbara to be head of school when I was on the board of trustees. So I'll take a little credit for that person in your life.
Well, actually, my English teacher, my freshman year, was also Jean St. Pierre. And she was also an absolutely formative teacher for me, separated by some I'm not going to do precise math here, years. And so it does speak to the fact that there's, a certain thread that ties us that is deeper than we even know.
These are some really cool connections. Thank you everyone for all your answers. I'm Joseph, and I'm a senior from Wellesley, Massachusetts. I know several of our panelists are parents of past, current, and potentially future Andover students. This panel has a combined 100 years of professional experience. So for all of our panelists, if you had to give yourself advice from when you were an Andover student, what would that advice be? And Ms. Urie, would you like to start this time?
I'm happy to. I would say work hard to find something you love, something that just, when you wake up every morning, you're glad to be doing it. You don't think of it as work. You're happy to be doing it. Typically, if that is the case and you find that, you will likely be good at it. You'll likely be able to earn a living at it. And earning a living at it doesn't mean making a fortune. Earning a living at it means that you're able to be compensated for what you're doing. But I'd also add to that, it's also really important to remember to do something good in the world. Your life is not all about what you do professionally. There are the paid and unpaid parts of what you do in life. And so don't be so consumed by the career that you forget that there is richness in what you do outside of work, which could be family, it can be volunteer activities, but do something good in the world and add that to what you do professionally. It may take you time to find the thing you love, and that's okay. Don't be discouraged. Keep trying. If the first thing you try you don't like, hey, there's plenty of opportunities out there and plenty of choice. So keep working at it. And I think Andover provides that base for having the confidence to say, well, this isn't right, but I'm going to try something else. That gives you that confidence to know that you can learn, to know that you can pursue something different, to know that you can dive in and apply the skills or the good study habits or whatever we all learned when we were there. So find what you love, be good at it, hopefully make a living at it, and do good in the world.
Tasneem? So this is what I would tell my Andover self, and maybe even my current Andover student, is take a moment to mindfully linger. So soak in your Andover experience. And I know that sounds so sort of simple, but it's actually really not that simple. You know, Ralph Hill reading. Take a little bit longer to actually do the reading. Think about the reading. The calculus problem. Maybe just work on it a little longer and maybe try to speak in Spanish a little bit more than you normally do, because you have 4 years in Andover and then you'll be on to the next thing. You're not going to get your 4 years back. And it's such a rich experience. And I think that I do it myself. You don't linger in these amazing moments. You don't actually let it sink in. I mean, I think about my educational experience from Phillips to Wellesley to HBS, and every time I come back to campus for whatever reason, whether it be volunteering or taking a walk, I always think about, if I just slow down and if I just spent a little longer on that case, or when I was at Wellesley, I love my sociology classes. I was actually a sociology major that went into finance. If I just, thought a little harder about that class discussion that we were on, instead of just checking the box. Don't check the box. It's your moment to really enjoy the intellectual journey that you're on at Andover and beyond. So take the opportunity, because once you're out of the intellectual journey, you're out. You don't get as much time to linger. So make sure you do. There's a lot of value in it.
Karen?
Yeah, I would say that, maybe my best advice is, whether it be your Andover career, your time in college, or your professional career, don't believe and assume that there's a straight line to get from point A to what you think the point B is that you think you want to get to. You are going to have unexpected challenges, and you're going to have unexpected successes along the way. You're going to like certain things you didn't expect to like, and not like other things that you did expect to like. So whether it's a challenge in the form of a grade that you're not happy with, or whatever else might happen during your Andover career, or whether it's a teacher that really inspires you in a way that you didn't expect from a class, be open to that and be ready to change course, and be ready to really embrace the opportunities that come from the uncertainty that we all experience in life.
Oh, Kanyi, you're muted.
First advice I would give is, I mean, it's a flavor of what all these other esteemed panelists have said, but there's more to life than how your resume looks, and if you lead with the things that inspire your curiosity and that bring you joy, that's going to make you have a resume you're going to retire proud of more often than not. And so I think let curiosity be your guide. And second thing I'd say, which Andy also alluded to, is there's certain types of good behaviors that beget themselves. When you are generous, you feel more generous, you get even more generous. When you are courageous, you feel even more courageous. When you work hard, it gives you capacity to work even harder. And so there are certain types of qualities that if you're trying to figure out how to practice non-civi, just do it, because that will allow you to do it more, because it is sort of contagious on itself. It's a recursive function. And those three in particular, hard work, courage, and generosity, are practices that you can build. And if you build all three of those when you're young, then you're going to be able to do anything you want as you grow.
Thank you all for those answers. That was all great advice. My name is Joe Murphy, and I'm a senior day student from Andover, Mass. And we are now transitioning over to questions from our live audience. The first question is from one panelist to another. It's from Mr. Maqubela to Miss Urie. Does this moment in tech and venture capital seem more like 2000 or more like 2008, and why?
I'm going to say neither. I don't think we have a wreck going on like 2000 and a bubble bursting like 2000. And we're not in the midst of we are coming off the pandemic, but we're not in the midst of what we would think of as a global financial crisis, the way we were in 2008 and 2009. I think when there are good innovators and entrepreneurs out there, the investors like yourselves, all of you on this panel, will invest, and you're not investing for the short term, you're investing for the long term. You're creating jobs, you're creating new ideas, you're creating impact in many cases. So I think it's maybe a little bit more challenging. Cost of capital is higher. People maybe are sitting on the sidelines a bit more, but I don't think it's a replay of 2008 or 2000. It's always different. You know, when people say this is a repeat, I often think, or they say we're in a new paradigm, I immediately question it. You look for parallels. You know, we learn from history, so it's important to be mindful of the history in the capital markets and in the venture industry or the private investment industry. But I don't think we should anchor in those past crises. I think we have to think of this new and use the skills that we all learned it through our experience and our education to analyze it in real time and to dig deeply into what's going on now. So hope that answers the question.
Very good news. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Urie. Ms. Dohadwala mentioned that she was a sociology major, but for Mr. Maqubela, how has your undergraduate studies in philosophy contributed to your career in investing?
It's contributed to my career in investing by making me extremely insecure about my financial abilities. No, on a more serious level, you know, you've got Russian literature, you've got sociology. You know, we're deep in operating models and in P&Ls and in, you know, margin structures. And I think it's in part because finance is not simply what finance majors do. Finance is how value gets created in the world, and is one of the measures of how value gets created in the world. And so learning how to be a rigorous thinker and learning how to be very disciplined and thought process driven and internally consistent, I think is maybe more important than being specifically trained in one avenue of finance because it's broad. That said, I do think that having training does make a difference. And in my particular brand of venture capital, which is actually early stage technology, it's more often to be product training, and it's more often to be technology training than it is financial training. And so what I actually do is I rely more on my startup experience, and I rely more on my founder experience and more on my product experience as a way of diligencing and understanding companies. But the philosophy has trained me in the rigor and being a good reader, which I think is important.
Thank you, Mr. Maqubela. This question is for any of our panelists. What are VCs advising their startups to do to brace themselves for increasing inflation and the recessionary environment?
I can take it. I actually spend a lot of time talking to my companies about this. So I'll try to be fast because there's many things that we have to do to prepare. One thing is understanding. So step one is you need to look at your plan and think about what is the milestone you're trying to achieve with the money that you have on hand. Are you going to make it? And if you're not, we're seeing a lot of our companies in a very positive way, actually, thinking ahead and saying, you know what, we need to raise a small amount of money, a bridge round to make sure we're going to make the milestone, which then you can go off and, raise more money on. That's one thing. The other thing is you have to really think about increasing costs everywhere. So the cost to hire people, talent has actually been more expensive and harder to get. The cost of, for example, in our medical devices, all the sterilization, all the component pieces, all the manufacturing, everything is more expensive. A clinical trial, running a clinical trial is more expensive. So you have to budget for all these increased costs. And it all adds up over time. And the other thing, so understanding your cash need in the new sort of in the new pricing model is really critical for them to do. So making sure they're going to hit their milestone, understanding how they're budgeting their sort of new expense model, for new expenses, that's really critical. And I think that for people that are raising money, whether it's an existing company or a brand new company, I think this is critically important. When funds are sort of tight, or maybe VCs are taking a little bit of a, they're just sort of watching and waiting. I think you have to be able to crystallize your value proposition even that much better. You have to be able to sell your vision, and you have to be able to sell it in a very articulate manner. And so the bar is higher, right? Because especially venture firms that have existing portfolio companies, we're going to think about supporting our existing portfolio companies first, rather than bringing on new investments. We are many of us, including ourselves, are still investing in new companies, but we are thinking about making sure that we can support our existing companies. So the bar for new companies is that much higher in times where things are a little tighter. But again, VC is a long game. We're not in the short game. We're holding companies for a long period of time. And so what we're going to continue to do, which we've always done, is with our current companies, focus on the fundamentals, and the new companies focus on the fundamentals, and make sure. And if those are all aligned, then you're going to trust it, and we're going to go with it. Hopefully that was helpful.
I might just echo what you said, Tasneem, and just say that when you look at a company's life cycle and you see the companies progress from the growth phase to the phase where they're profitable, they're also considering many of those same items, right? We are, private equity owned companies that are continuing to grow, but are also focused on profits, are having to make decisions right now. They're having to decide, where do I want to spend my money on, on growth at this point? Do I want to invest in capital? Do I want to invest in people? Or do I want to save that liquidity because I don't know how rainy the day might be? And so, I think no matter where a company is in its life cycle, all companies are making those decisions. And I would dare say that companies that are likely to do best are the ones that are really, really thoughtful around those decisions.
Thank you, Ms. Dohadwala and Ms. Simeone. For the next question is for Ms. Urie. Can you speak to your experience in social impact investing and the importance of doing good in a field highly driven by profitability and performance?
Sure. I've spent a lot of time doing this largely because we work with investors who care deeply about aligning their portfolios with their mission. And so most of my career I have spent thinking about how does a foundation that supports environmental issues, how do they think about what their investments, if you think how they deploy their not only their grant making, but their investment portfolios. More recently, there's been a significant interest in creating a more diverse set of investment managers. And when I stepped aside from being the CEO of Cambridge Associates in 2016, I had planned to retire. And the new CEO asked me to stay on. And I said, well, I'll stay on if I can work on sustainability and impact and on diversity, equity, and inclusion in our industry. And so for the last 6 years, this is what I've been doing with our clients. And it has been a richly rewarding capstone to the time I've spent at the firm, because there are so many great investors who are focused on sustainability and impact, and so much that's going on in the venture capital industry right now in terms of climate change technology, addressing the very pressing issues that we see in climate. And there are so many. I'm now chairing Stanford's Diverse Manager Advisory Committee, which is just a wonderful thing to have been asked to do. And so I work with my alma mater on trying to identify great new managers who are coming from underrepresented minority populations, where as I said, 100% of the talent resides in 100% of the population. And if you're just pragmatic and looking for the best outcomes, you're going to look everywhere. And it's hard. It's hard to find good managers, no matter what population they're in. And I don't want to disparage anyone, but white males do not have a corner on great investment results. We know this. Look at this panel here, and you can see immediately that there's talent in the asset management industry that does not come from the traditional populations. So I've been spending the last 6 years doing this, and I have, I've spent a lot more than 6 years, but the last 6 years I have done this exclusively in my kind of capstone period at Cambridge Associates. But right from the start, when I walked into Cambridge Associates in 1985, we were working on impact. At the time, it was South Africa divestment. It was a very different issue in the mid 80s. And so right from the start of my time in the investment world, I've been thinking about issues around divestment, issues around engagement, issues around impact. And I think not just endowed nonprofits, but I think all investors have this very much top of mind these days.
Thank you, Ms. Urie. This question is for any of our panelists. How much importance does the VC industry put on investors having direct startup experience?
That is an evolving answer, and it's probably always going to be evolving, because it's a complex world, and the types of underlying companies that VCs are excited about are constantly changing. And so there was a period of time where, this is a little bit counterintuitive, but there was a period of time for about a decade where software as a service, particularly for businesses, was an incredible place to invest. And it was almost like a decade where you invest in SaaS and things go up as they go to the right. And so as a result, what that, alongside a number of other factors, had was a lot of VCs who thought they could paint by numbers. And so they'd say, oh, look at this revenue and look at that churn and look at that margin. That's a good business. And so there were tons of venture investors going after a relatively limited number of deals. And what's counterintuitive about that is a lot of those founders were saying, well, I've got all these investors who are excited. Why should I work with this one versus this one versus this one? And the reason why it's cyclical and it's a complex answer was there was a period of time where a lot of those entrepreneurs would say, well, how are you going to help me? Are you going to help me with sales? Are you going to help me with product? Are you going to help me with, and in that case, having some experience or some credibility makes a big difference. But then there was another part of the cycle, particularly the last couple of years, where it was like, show me the money, what's your price? And, we're all kind of bearing the burden of having participated in that more recently, but, these things cycle in and out. But I think maybe most important takeaway, though, is among the VC investors that I think are some of the best of all time, or some of the most successful. You have a journalist, you have somebody who was pretty much only ever a VC. You have a salesperson who was selling software out of a trunk. You've got an investment banker. You've got a former college basketball player who then went to an investment bank, hated it, and then became a VC. So it's kind of all over the map over the course of history, at least in my opinion.
Thank you all for such thoughtful responses. Hello, everyone. My name is John Moe, and I'm a day student from North Andover in the class of 2024. On behalf of the entirety of the Andover community, we are so beyond grateful to all our panelists for their time this evening. You are all clear leaders in the field of finance and venture capital, and sharing your expertise has just been incredible to hear about, and we are so very appreciative. I will now turn it to Mrs. Savino to close the evening.
Thank you, John, and thank you to our stars and to our panelists. So for those who know what this means, it is penultimate week at school right now. So it means it's the last big week of assignments, and then next week they kind of gear up and then get ready for finals. So the turnout of students on this on the screen tonight is awesome, and for the really hard work they put into creating these questions. So for the students, I want to say thank you. You put in a lot of good work and your questions were really thoughtful. Thank you very much. For our panelists, when we work with the stars from the alumni office, we pitch this kind of promised land out there in the world, that there are alumni all over the world that will be part of their family and are part of their family. And we kind of pitch this Andover for life. And you have in fact demonstrated that this evening with your generous points of view, your honest and brave answers, and frankly, your reflection on the Andover family, which reinforces our message a little bit. So thank you very much for that. I want to say thank you for all of you across the screens who have gathered to be with us. It's great to see such a huge turnout. Thank you all for making the time for Andover tonight. Be well, stay well, and we'll see you soon. Good night, Andover. Thank you.
Good night.